Over 100,000 are expected at the Tucson Festival of Books here. It's a two-day weekend festival. We are in day 2 of live coverage of Book TV. There are also over 300 authors, and one of them is Nina Burleigh. She's here to take your phone calls after just listening to her and others talk about journalism. The lines are lit up, so we'll get to those in a minute. I want to begin with why you wrote the book and what you were hoping people would get out of it.
I wrote the book because I was there on election night watching Donald Trump get elected and take in the Hilton, in the New York Hilton. He entered with his entourage of women, all of them in 4-inch heels, not looking down, not having to look down because they're used to wearing shoes like that with perfectly ironed hair, all of it TV and camera ready. And I thought, wow, these are the new role models for our daughters. This is the American face, the face of American womanhood. And it was just such a flip from what obviously had been before the election ended with the bad hair day, pantsuit, middle-aged woman. You would never see a woman like that on Trump's arm. And I thought I'd like to investigate what sorts of women are in his life, what are they like, and also how did they shape him? And I got into his mother and his grandmother as well, women about whom very little is known because the Trump organization doesn't talk about his grandmother, the founder of the Trump company, really. And I wanted people to think about what does it mean to have women like this as our role models, and who are they? And that was the impetus, really.
What do you say to critics who think they should be off limits? You know, the First Lady and his children.
Well, the children, I don't get it. Oh, you mean the children who are part of the, well, first of all, the children, his children who are in the administration, and I only deal with Ivanka here. I don't even really get into Tiffany. I think once you're a senior advisor to the president, you're no longer an off-limits child. I do not talk about Barron at all in this book. I won't talk about him with you. We don't go there. As far as the wives, I don't know. I mean, we've had, every president's wife has been written about. Obviously, reporting has indicated that some reporting has indicated that Melania wasn't quite on board with running for president or wasn't particularly happy. You read about that. But she is a public figure now, whether she wants to be or not. And his mother and his grandmother, who are no longer alive, are very interesting people to look at as well because they are part of history of the President of the United States.
Well, let's go to calls. John is up first in San Francisco. John, welcome to the conversation.
Hello, thank you for having me. I wanted to bring Nina's attention to a story that's been out there for a while. It's about Maria Butina, the woman who was accused of basically accused in the media of being a spy and as being a Red Sparrow type, where everything was thrown at her that she had used sex for getting her ends met. But I was thinking you had mentioned Amanda Knox, and I was thinking it's a close parallel. Because here this woman is arrested, put into solitary confinement, and basically kept incommunicado for weeks and months. And now it turns out that the prosecution has had to back off from saying that she used sex and all these nefarious things, and had to admit that she was a student with a 4.0 grade point average. But I'm just curious if you're aware of this story, and it seems to me that there's been a failure in the media. Now, James Bamford just came out with a great article in the New Republic where he basically burst the bubble on her whole story. And I'm curious, have you heard about the James Bamford article or read it? And maybe you have some reflections on how she was basically fitted up.
Okay.
I'm familiar with James Bamford. He's actually a friend of mine. I haven't read that article. I know the general outlines of it. And what I would say is, in her case, and you're right, there is perhaps an Amanda Knox analogy, attractive young females who are accused of crimes are held to a different standard in terms of, I think, the amount of attention that they get and the amount of curiosity, and they're sexualized, and especially, you know, an accused Russian a spy or an alleged Russian spy. Of course, there's going to be that kind of attention, and we're living in a moment where there's this gigantic Russian you know, the paranoia and a scare moment of, you know, feeling that the Russians are everywhere, right? And so I'm not familiar with her case, but you bring up a really good point, and I think it's worth looking further into. Thank you for asking about it.
For those that might not know, Nina Burleigh is also the author of The Fatal Gift of Beauty, The Trials of Amanda Knox. Guy in Troy Grove, Illinois.
Hello. Thank you for taking the call. We're here in Illinois with a pretty much Democratic background and unions forever down here. We have AFL-CIO, steelworkers, trade unions, etc. And that's really what's important to most people in this area. They're working people, they have homes, they've been paying taxes forever. And the problem with trying to get onto Trump that most of us see just because of women issues and this and that, is because JFK had his women. The President Clinton had his women, of course. And that wasn't important to us then either, because it was how the economy went. The economy was good for a while with Clinton. And then the economy looked good, but after he signed NAFTA, that just cut our throats. Our own factory was going to expand with the new tank. As soon as NAFTA was signed, they picked up the option they had on land down in Mexico, and they built the next tank down there for making glass. I mean, this, and see, those are the things.
Can I interrupt for a second and just can I just interrupt and say, I'm from Illinois. I am aware, because I grew up there, of what's happened to the towns in Michigan and Illinois where I grew up. I'm aware of what's happened to people with the loss of manufacturing jobs in this country. I'm aware of the problems, and I commend you for staying with the unions and trying to focus attention on this. And obviously, the attention on the economy and these kitchen table issues, or whether your kid is going to be able to afford to go to college, whether you can afford health care, and whether you have jobs, and whether you have roof over your head, is far more important than Melania Trump and the story of Trump's women. That is, I am not disagreeing with that at all. But I think my book has a lot of insights into this president, a lot of insights into things about him that affect us, including the way he treats the media. But even more importantly, you know, half the population of the United States is female. And we've elected a president with 19 allegations against him, that if those allegations had been made now, since the Harvey Weinstein case, he wouldn't have his television show anymore. I mean, people have been fired at much higher levels in all sorts of businesses, but especially entertainment and the media, for allegations that have to do with this president's behavior towards women. And it's important for us to think about it, because the president and the women who've been around him in his life for the last 2 or 3 decades have participated in the sexualization of the feminine, the commodification and branding of the feminine, and that's actually not a great thing for our daughters as role models.
Nina Burleigh, run through what you think are the top insights, the top insights that you got from researching this book about the president.
Well, the top insights, okay, one would be, I just mentioned this, the title, Golden Handcuffs. Obviously, that's an idiom. It has to do with if you have a job that's paying you a lot, but you hate it and you don't want to stay there. It's kind of a joke. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek. But one of the insights that I take away from my research into this president is that all of his relationships, sadly, have at their an element in them of implied emotional or actual blackmail, or the removal of financial support should you speak out? There are NDAs around him. There are, you know, there are gag orders on.
For those that
ex-wives.
don't know, NDA.
Non-disclosure agreements. You know, he's famous for having everybody sign them around him. All of the two ex-wives were basically muzzled in exchange for their money. In fact, the second wife was going to write something about him and had an open threat from his lawyers saying, we won't give you your alimony. And so that's one of the insights. That, you know, the sad thing about this president is that the relationships all have to do with emotional or actual implied threats of blackmail.
We'll go next to Kate in Scottsdale, Arizona. Kate in Scottsdale, Arizona? Or I might go to Kathy in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Hi, this is Kate.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I've just been reading a little bit about the golden handcuffs, and I've been really disappointed. This seems like a pointed, jaded book of opinions, calling the women who know Trump queens of Trumplandia and yacht people. You know, these opinions and idioms are... I think they're tactless, and I think this writing is pathetic. We need to work on some better things in this. Isn't there better things, Nina, we can work on?
Well, I mean, you picked out some of the more, I would say, tart comments or language that I use. But I think overall, the book is a very fair depiction, certainly of the mother and the grandmother. And it's also more sympathetic than a lot of people think that it should be.
Talk about his mother and grandmother.
Mother and the grandmother, amazing stories. He's got 4 immigrants around him. The most nativist president in modern history has 4 immigrants in his intimate world. His grandmother came here as a 20-something-year-old German woman, gave birth to 3 children. Her husband died, leaving her a widow with small children, and she took his nest egg and built a house next door, borrowed money to build it, sold it, and incorporated the first Trump organization. So the Trump organization was literally started by a female. That's been written out of the history. It's unbelievable because you could, I mean, imagine running for, if Ivanka were to run for office and say, you know, this great empire was started by a woman. Not brought up by President Trump for one reason or another. His own mother, also very interesting. One of the most surprising moments of my entire research was finding this thing out about her. She was the 10th child of a fisherman in a very impoverished Scottish island called the Isle of Lewis off the coast of Scotland, closer to Iceland than London, probably grew up in muck boots in the tidal flats, had probably a few dresses. They always went to church. They're a very religious island. She emigrated from Scotland to the United States at the age of 17 to join older sisters who had already come over here. And they came to the United States because in those days, the great families, the very wealthy families of New York, liked to employ butlers and nannies from the British Isles. And so they employed this young woman who arrived because she knew her sisters already in the world of footmen and maids and butlers to the great families of New York. She lived in the Carnegie Mansion as a maid at the bottom of a retinue of about 25 servants. Andrew Carnegie was one of the wealthiest men in America at the time, a steel magnate, and his widow was running this household when Trump's mother arrived. Trump likes to say, oh, my mom came here on holiday. Not true. And that's an amazing up by the bootstraps story. Then the wives are immigrants as well, but we can get into that later.
And his mom, you write about how his mom was around this wealth and became obsessed with it herself. And what impact do you think that had on the president?
I like to say, I don't know how many people have seen the Orson Welles movie Citizen Kane, but there's a term for this sort of the key to somebody's psyche, and I believe that Trump's mother and her life story and working in the Carnegie Mansion when she first arrived in New York passed down to Donald Trump the yearning for the royal and the classy and the ultra luxurious that was available to the very wealthiest Americans that his mother witnessed and then carried on through her own life, yearning for the luxuries of this upper class, that Donald Trump, being born in Queens, even though his family was very wealthy, and even though he arrived in Manhattan with quite a good pile of money from his father to start his business, was never part of the New York City blue blood community. And that's what he's longed for. He's always been on the outside looking in, and that explains quite a bit about what his personality is, I think.
Let's go to North Andover, Massachusetts. Karen, welcome to the conversation.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you, Ms. Burleigh, for this wonderful book. I've read part of it, but I do not agree with the previous caller. It's right on. It really is. It does give you a few anecdotes about what is, obvious to us as far as how he wants his women to look. You can't look not good. You just cannot. You will be tossed to the curb. I have one thing that happened to me this morning that just came into me since I was hearing you speak. I was with a large group of women who are in public office, and they are in state Senate offices and federal offices from Massachusetts, and they are mothers. And the mothers of America, I truly believe, are the only ones who are going to really rise up, just as we did right after his election, that amazing march. We are going to be the ones who change this, and we will continue to put more people in to the House and the Senate and probably the presidency. I'm not sure if it'll be this time, but at least it's going to be within the next 8 years, I would imagine. My question to you is, what about his sister, the judge? Has she been
fascinating? It's a really good
speak?
question. It's a really good question. I think that the siblings, he has 4 siblings, and I think most of them are kind of laying low. I'm not going to say in hiding, but they're laying low. They're staying out of the line of fire. But the sister that you're particularly asking about, the older sister, really interesting. That somebody like her would come from this family, because the father was, Fred Trump, very patriarchal, very sexist, wouldn't allow the word pregnant to be used in the household. But this daughter, Elizabeth, older than Trump, is almost like the Republican Hillary. She went to a women's college, one of the 7 sisters, I think it was Smith. She graduated with high honors. She put herself through law school as a single mother, and then went on to the federal bench. And she's a moderate Republican. She's in fact attracted the invective of anti-choice people, because she made some rulings that had to do with abortion. So, she was a moderate Republican. Very interesting. Donald does have women around him who are capable and who he trusts, and that I think goes back to the grandmother. And she was the founder of this company. She was part of their life until he was in his 20s. And I think also Donald Trump, the president, has attitudes, about men. It's sort of a dog-eat-dog world. It's about domination, and there are certain women in his life who are not people that he has carnal attraction to, who are people that he can trust and entrust in a way that that he can't trust other men. And I would say that Nancy Pelosi is actually sort of falling into that category about now.
And this older sister, does he have a relationship with her? I mean, does she have an impact on him?
Well, that I don't know. I mean, I think that if you talk to people around him, and I have talked to people around him who are close to them, who are in the family, he doesn't listen to anyone. He doesn't listen to them. They can give him advice. He maybe will listen to Ivanka on occasion. Jared's like the president whisperer right now, but I don't know that he listens to them that much.
Elizabeth in Springfield, Illinois. You're next.
Hi, Nina. Admiring you and your research and writing here from way back in college days, and glad to hear you have this book out. Can't wait to pass it around to my book clubs. Pardon? I don't have a question.
Are you my English professor? Oh, you're my English professor. Hi. I know who you are. Thank you for calling in.
How did she do in college?
Oh my gosh. You know, in 20 years, she's right up there at the top, okay?
Thank you so much.
Oh, I don't think she had a question for you. We'll go on to Linda in Phoenix. Hi, Linda.
Hi. Glad to hear about your book. We'll look into it. My question is this, which I've been asking myself. Trump is a man who has had a very active sex life for a long time. Is it possible he has not impregnated someone and paid for an abortion? Has anyone thought about that? Has there been any investigative journalism about that? And if such information came out, what would it do to the evangelical vote that's so tied to him? And that's my question.
Okay.
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure how to answer it without getting myself in trouble. I would just say that you're not the first person or the only person who wonders about that. And in terms of my book, if I were to put something like that in there, rumors like that, I think we would have been able to maybe attract the Trump rage tweet, which everybody wants in the publishing industry because more book sales. But you can't, if it's not provable with documents or DNA tests, I don't think you can go down that road. And that's where I am. I don't have any information about that.
Yeah, talk about what you had to do to research this book. I mean, what your sources, the documents, et cetera?
Sure. So I started working on it right after the inauguration. I interviewed, there are lots and lots of people in New York who know Donald Trump and who know Ivana, his first wife, and who know the family. People in the fashion industry who know Melania, people in the photography world. And I studied all of their writings. I listened to their everything that they've ever said in public. And then I went to the hometowns in Germany, Scotland, Slovenia, and Czech Republic, and interviewed childhood friends, and interviewed colleagues, and put it all together. And I think I wrote a rocking good yarn, and I hope people will pick it up and look at it.
The book, Golden Handcuffs, The Secret History of Trump's Women. Nina Burleigh, thank you for the conversation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Up next,